Resuming debate, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Service and Procurement.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I very much appreciate the opportunity to speak in today's debate. And I want to thank my colleague from South Surrey White Rock for having put forward this very important motion and a very timely motion, which I will support. I have been calling for quite a long time for defense spending to be increased. And I believe that it is something that we owe to the men and women of our armed forces to make sure that those brave men and women who fight for Canada, who devote and sacrifice their time and their family life so that our country is well defended here and abroad, have all of the equipment, all of the services, all of the support, all of the training that they need in order to flourish. I don't believe that Canada's military should be anything less than a great military organization. We are the 10th biggest GDP in the world. We should have a fighting force that is equipped and ready to fit that representation of a country that has the 10th biggest GDP in the world. So for me, this is a very, very important motion to recognize that while we've done more, we've increased, it is true, the spending on the military from 2013, it was about 1% to about 1.37% today. We still need to do more to meet our NATO targets of 2%. So to remind us of that, I appreciate that. I also appreciate it being done at a time when Canadians, I think for the first time in my political career, are actually beginning to recognize the importance of spending on our armed forces. I think this conflict in Ukraine, the Russians' horrible aggression here under the very, 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 very bad Vladimir Putin, who is definitely a war criminal, what he and his henchmen and his military have done in Ukraine, starting a war in Europe, the first major war since the Second World War, is something that Canadians have looked at, seeing the images on TV. I mean, it's different than the Second World War when people received news from newspaper reports days later, when they saw things on film, but they didn't see things instantaneously on television. And Canadians, I think, are rightly horrified at what is happening. And they're saying, wow, Canada really needs to be part of defending Ukraine. And I've been proud of what we and our NATO allies have done. Our NATO allies, including Canada, have really stepped up to the plate, whether sending humanitarian assistance to Ukraine, whether sending military assistance to Ukraine, providing the training that we have provided over years for over 33,000 troops in Ukraine that have helped the Ukrainians on the ground counter the Russian aggression. With respect to the assistance we're going to be providing to those Ukrainians who want to come to Canada, whether temporarily or permanently, I think Canada has really, really stepped up. And I think that the fact that we are sending a second frigate we're sending the HCMS Halifax to Europe to join NATO military forces, our second frigate, is really important. What we're doing in Latvia is really important. The Aurora Maritime Patrol that has been transferred to NATO Command is important. The fact that we are commencing our next rotation of NATO-enhanced air policing in Romania is important. The extension of our commitment is important. 3,400 Canadian Armed Forces are on high readiness in case they need to go to Europe. That's important. And I want to just, again, thank those men and women of our armed forces for all of the incredible work we do. Et je veux aussi remercier nos anciens combattants. Parce que les anciens combattants que j'ai rencontrés pour la première fois quand j'ai été élu conseiller, j'étais très jeune, j'étais 23 ans, nous avons eu une légion où il y avait plein de monde qui étaient des anciens combattants de la Deuxième Guerre mondiale. Et c'est eux autres qui ont retourné pour construire les communautés qui existent dans mon comté. La ville de Côte-Saint-Luc où j'étais maire, la ville de Hampstead, la ville de Mont-Royal, le parti de Ville-Mont-Royal que je représente. Il y avait des anciens combattants qui étaient tellement courageux, qui ont quitté le Canada, Montréal, Québec, quand ils étaient 18 ans. Ils ont allé batailler dans la Deuxième Guerre mondiale et ils ont retourné, ils n'ont pas plaigné. Ils ont eu un esprit de bénévolat. Et ils ont battu nos communautés. Ils ont créé nos communautés. Et chaque année, on a eu des parades avec plein de gens. Aujourd'hui, il y a très, très peu de gens dans la Deuxième Guerre mondiale qui sont dans ces parades-là, qui sont capables. Et il faut rappeler qu'est-ce qu'ils ont vécu. Et je veux aussi utiliser cette occasion pour dire que c'est tellement important d'offrir des services aux anciens combattants dans les 2 langues officielles avec une égalité réelle. Et c'est-à-dire que les plaintes ou des documents déposés en français devraient être traités dans le même temps que les documents en anglais. Et donc, c'est quelque chose que je vais continuer de battre pour. But, Madam Speaker, what I also want to have a chance to say is that I want to appreciate the way this House has treated this topic in a nonpartisan way. Because there's a lot of things we can argue about, and I heard the member for Louis Saint Laurent say that before. There's a lot of things we can argue about, but the defending our country is not one of them. The support for our armed forces is not one of them. The support for our veterans is not one of them. And I have been so heartened to see this House's unanimous support for Ukraine, and the fact that we didn't have any dissenting voices in imposing sanctions on Russia, in all of the actions we've taken to support Ukrainians in this terrible battle that Russia and Vladimir Putin have started. And I think also, Madam Speaker, this motion also importantly reflects the new geopolitical realities in the world. We are now at a time where Russia, although it has been for a long time, is finally seen to be the true threat that it is, whether cybersecurity, whether our Arctic, where we are a neighbor of Russia. We need to be prepared for that Russian threat. Russia is pushing China as well in this regard. They're watching carefully in terms of Taiwan, what Russia is doing in Ukraine to see if they can get away with something. We need to be prepared as NATO allies, as Canadians, to stand true. And the final thing that I want to say on that point, Madam Speaker, is that when it comes time to looking at our geopolitical realities, we also have to look at whether or not we can always depend on the United States and NORAD to defend us. Now, with our current president, I want to particularly thank President Biden, because the United States is the world's strongest democracy. They have the strongest armed forces in the world. We rely, as do our NATO allies, on U.S. leadership when it comes time to taking on a worldwide nuclear power like Russia. And the United States, Secretary Blinken, President Biden have consulted with us, have consulted with NATO allies, have done all kinds of things to show that leadership that was missing in the previous Trump administration. But what I saw during the Trump administration was we couldn't necessarily rely, if we have a president like Donald Trump, on the United States to step up and defend Canada in every single way. And so Canada needs to be prepared more than we have been to defend ourselves. We hope we'll always have our best friend and ally, the United States, in our corner, but we need to make sure that we not only step up to the plate to share the responsibility with the United States to defend our continent, we need to be prepared even if they're not there for us. So this motion saying we should increase the percentage of defense spending to meet those NATO targets, although we're on track to improve, and I do want to say that, it is so important to keep doing that, to keep getting up to that 2%, and to make sure that we are properly equipped, properly trained, and that all the men and women who have given so much to Canada, whether in the past or today, get exactly what they deserve, the best support possible from the Canadian Parliament of all parties. Thank you, Madam Speaker.